Hello, welcome back. I've been reading lots of things that's made my poor little brain melt from my ears, and the first of those is Custom Reality and You by Peter Coffin. He has a YouTube channel where he talks about politics and advertising and things, and the book is kind of follows on from that. It discusses things like the true definition of postmodernism, individualism as a philosophy and marketing, but filters it through understandable things in the modern age like YouTube, South Park, Reddit and so on. There's a lot of really interesting things in it which got me thinking. Like, I like what he said about centrists and centrism. South Park tends to be very centrist, even though I love it. They're essentially fighting for the status quo. They want things to stay the same. They see both sides as bad, despite one side being actively seeking for change for the better, no matter whether you agree with the way that certain individuals handle things, and also the way people like, say, Richard Dawkins or Jordan Peterson are so keen to protect the freedom of speech of people with very abhorrent views, but they don't seem to think about the way white nationalist speech has marginalised certain groups of people already who are vulnerable, you know, trans people, people of colour and so on. And I particularly liked this quote on the subject. When a white supremacist is given the platform to say their piece, people sympathetic to that belief, or prone to be, galvanise. Many find they are not alone. This white supremacist on TV, no less, has validated the viewer's questionable worldview, something maybe no one else in their life does. For examples of freedom of speech being violated somehow, people often bring up the fact that people have been deplatformed, as they say, from speaking at universities. But I thought this quote was particularly interesting. A college decided not to have Charles Murray speak. This is what Southern Poverty Law Centre had to say. Charles Murray, a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, has become one of the most influential social scientists in America, using racist pseudoscience and misleading statistics to argue that social inequality is caused by the genetic inferiority of the Black and Latino communities, women and the poor. So essentially, it's kind of saying if an idea has been debunked over and over again by various people, why is it absolutely imperative that they speak at these places that will give them bigger platforms? You know, if they want to say these things, that's up to them, but why is it so important to give them the opportunity to say these terrible things to even more people? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, Custom Reality and You, I thought it was very interesting. I don't agree with him on everything. He seems to want to get society in a place where money doesn't exist, and all forms of capitalism are perhaps bad. I mean, maybe you'll take something different from that, than I did, but that's kind of what I got. He says that getting into fandom and wanting to buy things from fandom, you shouldn't do that, but I disagree. I think I'm very socially awkward, and if I was to see somebody else wearing, say, a Welcome to Night Vale t-shirt, that's an immediate open. You can geek about it together and talk about how much you love it. If you want to own a t-shirt or something from something that you love, I don't personally see a problem with it. I get that there are issues with capitalism that need to be sorted out, but I'm not in favour of saying the whole thing doesn't work. It needs fixing, let's just say that. Okay, the next one I read is Crash Override by Zoe Quinn. If you're not familiar with the whole GamerGate thing, I don't quite know where you've been. A lady who had an abusive ex, and he published something online which was completely untrue, and the people of 4chan and then eventually more and more kind of ran with it and still harass her to this day, although thankfully not quite as bad. But Crash Override was a really intense, fascinating and scary read. I really enjoyed it, if that's the kind of word that one can use. But it just kind of brings home that there are people in real life and online, although that line is blurring, who are harassed by the very nature of who they are. You know, women get it bad enough, so just imagine how much worse it is for marginalised groups, you know. I mean, I've seen videos and posts that amounted to not much more than girls ew, and pictures of girls in skimpy clothes being shared as if it's some sort of proof of wrongdoing. And often they kind of make out like, oh well, if your feelings are going to be so hurt, you should just get offline, you obviously can't handle the internet. And I think that's so wrong, and Zoe Quinn points out why that's so wrong, in that she was a weird kid who was just making artsy kind of weird little video games, and it was never really meant to blow up into this thing. You know, our whole lives are now on the internet and everybody is there, and why should people put up with harassment? I mean, if you read the things that she was sent and had to go through, this is not just a bit of trolling, this is harassment. But one of the best things about the book is that with each thing that happens, with each way that she discusses the bad side of the internet, she also points out the great. And I actually was having a conversation about this with some people not so long ago, that the internet is a place where you can watch grotesque things. You know, some people want to watch a live stream of someone die on the dark web, whereas you can also do activism on there and share documents that people in other countries might not necessarily get to see because of the nature of their censorship, you know. So it's an amazing, fantastic, but also terrifying and dark place. She includes a few testimonials from other people as well. There's some women of colour who talk about the fact that some things I didn't realise, in that white women sometimes harass women of colour, and trans women are harassed by TERFs, you know. Basically each thing that marks you out as different is another thing that you'll be harassed for. It's just another thing that people will send you grotesque messages about. And another new bit of information is the fact that a lot of the problems stem from the companies themselves, with platforms such as Twitter, who seem to equate any kind of control with we're immediately going to turn into China. You know, that's not the case. And it's quite possible that it's because they don't want to stem the growth of their company. You know, it'll perhaps lead to less money or something. If you're having to like leave your house and you can't go home, and you're having to move around because of things that people might do, like, that's beyond a little bit of trolling. So yeah, Crash Override, Zoe Quinn, highly recommend it. Terrifying, but very good. But she is so positive, and that's an amazing thing, really. The end of the book was quite heartwarming and also really helpful. There's loads of guides about what you can do if you're in that situation, step by step. And if you go to her website, crashoverride.com, she's got really helpful advice on how to protect your information online and so on. So yeah, check it out. And the next one is Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. Another one I really enjoyed. Some of it can seem like it's about quite frothy subjects, but some of it's quite dark. It's different essays which veer from personal stories, one of which is harrowing, to comments on pop culture, from books to TV to art and highbrow, lowbrow, whatever. And she also discusses the fact that she likes some things that some would see as her being a bad feminist, from 50 Shades of Grey to the Sweet Valley High series. It's so good because she says a lot of things that I thought but didn't quite know how to articulate. And what she says about trigger warnings is fantastic, and I absolutely agree with every single word, but you should read it if you want to know. A really interesting quote I thought was this: "For whatever reason, we hold feminism to an unreasonable standard where the movement must be everything we want and must always make the best choices. When feminism falls short of our expectations, we decide the problem is with feminism rather than with the flawed people who act in the name of the movement. The problem with movements is that all too often they are associated only with the most visible figures, the people with the biggest platforms and the loudest, most provocative voices. And anyone who's ever come across a feminism fail video on YouTube understands what she's trying to say here. Essentially what I feel that she's saying a lot of the time is to have just some awareness. All you need to do is have some awareness. You can like what you like, whether it's something awful like 50 Shades of Grey, but as long as you have an awareness of who you are and where you are in the world and how you could be affecting other people. I hate to use the word privilege because people hear buzzwords like that and just immediately switch off, but there's no other way of saying it. Basically, privilege doesn't mean that you have never suffered. It just means that there are things in your life which will make it easier for you over somebody else. I mean, I myself had an abusive ex, just like Zoe Quinn, and I talk about that in my anxiety video. So if you want to know more, it's in there. But I'm still aware of the fact that there are things in my life which give me an easier road. I'm white, you know, I don't have a bad background. These are just all things that we've got to be aware of. When she discusses things like reality TV and the ways in which it can harm perceptions of women and things like that, what I like is the fact that she will point them out and criticise, but also allow for the fact that you don't have to stop enjoying these things. I really like Top Model, and I'm not going to make excuses for it. It's terrible, but I just really enjoy watching it. She kind of allows you as you read it to accept the fact that you're not perfect, you're a human. It's okay to be a, quote, bad feminist, you know, as long as you're aware of the basic things in life to become a better person. That's all you can ask of yourself and anyone else, really. And the last one is So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson. This is a very specific problem that it discusses. It's not necessarily about people who are attacked by virtue of who they are. So it's not particularly about trans or people of colour or so on. It's more about people who have made a mistake and end up facing the severe consequences for it. Zoe Quinn in her book points out that even if you make a crappy joke online, no one deserves abuse, especially ongoing abuse. You can't help but read this and agree. I mean, yeah, sure, some people might say some crappy stuff online and they should be called out for it. I'm all for that. Some people are under the impression shaming and outrage are purely the left or SJW things, like people can be separated into breeds, like skeptics are rational, SJWs are all feelings, and it's madness. People are people, and there are some people who want to have a conversation about things, there are some people who are genuinely upset by things, and there are some people who just really love taking things too far. Either side, it happens with both. And what happened to the girls of GamerGate is a great example of how, you know, that was definitely not the left doing that, especially if you read some of the things that they were saying. I honestly second guess everything I say online so much now. And I feel like it's a kind of fascinating time with the internet because we're just sort of kind of just beginning to find our way and we aren't quite sure where it's going yet. We aren't used to being this open. You know, you say something, you're used to just your friends or someone commenting, and if you make a really off-colour joke, you're used to your friends like laughing or going, oh god, that's awful. And many are not used to seeing people from outside of that bubble, seeing what you've said and taking actual real offence to it. So, you know, how are we going to improve on that? How are we going to grow? How is this going to change the way that we communicate? I'm quite fascinated to find out. So yes, a pile of fascinating books, and each and every one I thoroughly recommend if you want to be frightened and have the cogs of your brain turning. Okay, I will see you soon. I've got a writer's retreat coming up that I won a place on, so I'll let you know how it goes. Bye.